Republicans claim to be champions of individual liberty, but all they really care about is getting to be in charge. Think back to the 2016 presidential primaries. Every other clown in that circus went out of their way to denounce Donald Trump, to call him an embarrassment, to declare that if he got the nomination, it would spell the end of the Republican Party. But then what happened? Republican primary voters selected Trump to be the HCIC, head clown in charge. And overnight, all of that stalwart opposition flipped into shameless submission. Republicans like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio, who had warned ominously of what Trump would mean for the party and the country, and who had been frequent targets of Trump's juvenile and sometimes threatening mockery, became his most dogged defenders, especially once he was president. The same Republicans who had just spent the previous 8 years decrying Barack Obama as a wannabe dictator every time the man issued an executive order were now arguing, seriously, in public, that Trump, as the president, should pretty much be allowed to do whatever he wants. And when he lost his bid for re-election in 2020 and began to spread dangerous lies accusing Democrats of stealing the election, those same Republicans who had once spoken of Donald Trump as though he were the Antichrist eagerly joined in his effort to thwart the will of the people and illegally remain in power. What Donald Trump attempted following the 2020 election was a coup. And it took place over a much longer period of time than just January 6, 2021, although the events of that day were the most overt and violent phase of the attempt. And nearly every prominent Republican in the country, elected officials, pundits, political operatives, openly supported that attempted coup. That's because Republicans aren't Republicans. They're monarchists. But they're selective monarchists. They think the United States should have a king, but only if it's one of them. They're also completely fine with kings or queens or various other flavors of monarchs in other countries as well. They had no objections when Trump, in reckless defiance of international norms, began cozying up to North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. They rarely have anything bad to say about Vladimir Putin, who by title is the president of Russia, but is an elected official in only the most rhetorical sense. The same can be said of the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, who was an invited speaker at last month's CPAC event in Dallas, Texas. And for the most part, Republicans have had nothing but nice things to say about Queen Elizabeth following her recent death. You might think that last one is more reasonable. The general reaction to Queen Elizabeth's death across the global governing class has been one of appreciation and sympathy, but I'm not so sure. President Biden ordered flags to half-staff in honor of the late Queen, delivered remarks praising her, and attended her memorial service at Westminster Abbey. But as a head of state, we wouldn't expect anything else from him. The UK is one of the US's most important allies. Of course, the President of the United States isn't going to do anything to offend the Brits at a time like this. But Republicans, especially in this mask-off post-Trump era, don't give a shit about our allies. Many of them are isolationists. Few, if any of them, had anything critical to say when Trump spent his 4 years as president wiping his feet all over our international alliances. My point is, if Republicans really believed in the things they say they believe in, individual liberty, small government, wouldn't the death of Queen Elizabeth have been a perfect opportunity to denounce the idea of monarchy and crow about the superiority of the American system? It's not like they give a shit about sparing the feelings of some people in the United Kingdom. So why didn't they do that? I think it's because they don't actually have a problem with the idea of a monarchy. They like the idea, in fact. And that being the case, they certainly didn't want to speak out against it and give their supporters the impression that an autocratic ruler is a bad thing. Hell no, it's a good thing. It's the very thing we're after. If the British monarchy has a flaw, it's that it's been far too weakened by constitutionalism. The King of the UK has no real power. If we had a king, you'd better believe our king would be the boss. None of this crown and parliament horseshit. The word of the sovereign would be law. That's the American way. See, the lesson most Republicans seem to have taken from American history isn't, after the Revolution, our people were free, but after the Revolution, we got to run the show. And by we, they don't mean all citizens through representative democracy. They mean them. We won our independence from the king! Long live the king. What do Republicans care about? Being in charge. What is their core principle? The belief that they should be in charge. What are their policies? Whatever they have to say and do to get and stay in charge. Everything else is just artifice. Sure, they still say individual liberty, small government. They talk about standing up to the oppression of political correctness, or woke, as they call it now. But don't just judge them by what they say. Judge them by what they do and what they want to do. They pass voter suppression laws designed to discourage turnout among demographics that typically vote more for Democrats. They oppose election reforms like ranked choice voting and independent redistricting. Republicans from Lindsey Graham to Matt Gaetz to Trump himself have said repeatedly, publicly, that if more voters are allowed to actually vote, it would be bad for Republicans, which is why they oppose things like universal mail-in ballots and automatic voter registration. They support laws that could conceivably allow state legislatures to ignore the results of presidential elections and assign their state's electoral votes to whichever candidate they choose, something Trump and his allies actually tried to do following his loss in the 2020 election. They side with Trump when he steals classified government documents and takes them to his house and refuses to give them back, despite repeated requests from the National Archives, to the point where the FBI had to come and get them. They accept and echo Trump's absurd claims that he magically declassified the documents, that somehow, by some deranged logic, sensible only to him, he has a right to keep them, even though he is no longer the president. They assist him in his efforts to distract and delay and deliberately confuse the issue. Sometimes folks on my side of the political spectrum will still have moments where we shake our heads in disbelief and say, why Trump? Why did the Republicans drop even the pretense of being a serious political party and throw everything behind this guy? And I understand why we still find ourselves asking that question, given, just everything about Donald Trump. But let's not forget that we know the answer. They didn't throw everything behind Trump until he became their ticket to power. And once he got in, the mission became keeping him in power, because that's always the mission. Embracing and supporting Trump and all of his boorishness and recklessness and flagrant corruption and brazen disdain for the rule of law required the Republicans to drop that pretense of seriousness and legitimacy, and so they did. Once that was gone, once it was obvious to everyone that they never actually cared about all those high-minded conservative principles they claimed to hold sacred, all they had left was their lust for power and the fear and dishonesty and outright criminality in which they traffic in order to chase that lust. That's who they are. That's who they've been my entire life, and longer than that. But now there's no denying it. They aren't servants of the people. They will happily ignore the will of the people whenever possible. They aren't champions of freedom and personal autonomy. They will gleefully rob you of your freedom and autonomy if they think it will earn them the votes of two of your neighbors. And if they ever get to the point where they don't need those votes, they'll do the same to your neighbors too. Democracy isn't so much a path to power for them as it is an obstacle to be overcome. They'll say what they need to say to get enough people to vote for them, lie, make promises they have no intention of keeping, provide scapegoats and boogeymen. But campaigning for votes is an inconvenience they will rid themselves of the first chance they get, and don't think for a second I'm fucking around when I say that. Now, obviously I've been preaching to the choir up to this point, but just on the off chance that any Republicans are watching this, let me say something to you before I wrap this up. Actually, let me make a request. Now that it's obvious to anyone who wants to see it, just admit it. You don't want to govern, you want to rule. And you've cultivated a base of supporters who are eager to be ruled by you because you've made them believe that you will protect them and punish their imagined enemies, a group which apparently consists mostly of people of color, women, transgender children, and people who politely suggest responsible behavior during public health crises. You don't want an elected president. You want to install your guy as head clown in charge for life. You want a king, and you want your rightful places in the nobility. You're not Republicans. You're monarchists. I know a lot of folks also call you fascists, and by the way, I think that label totally fits. But personally, I think monarchists is at least broadly accurate too. You have to admit, you do have a history of supporting patrilineal dynasties. So just admit what you really are. And maybe if you do, more of the people who are supposed to be trying to stop you will finally get it through their heads that they need to be trying a lot harder.